Hi guys! For my current event, I did this article called English Language Learners, How Your State is Doing by Claudio Sanchez, and it's kind of part of this 5 Million Voices initiative. So the story behind the 5 Million Voices is that there are nearly 5 million ELLs in the United States that are not being taught properly. So this article is really interesting because it brings up a lot of great points, finds a lot of great statistics to kind of overlook and see how many English language learners really aren't receiving what they need throughout the United States. So it starts out with talking about the main languages of ELLs. A lot of ELLs speak Spanish. In Pennsylvania, we have about 70% of our ELLs speak Spanish, about 5% speak Chinese. We really don't have any Vietnamese speakers, and about 5% speak Arabic. So again, most of these students are speaking Spanish, and I thought this chart was actually one of the most interesting in the article because it shows us that most ELLs were actually born in the United States. So from pre-K to 5th grade, 85% were born in the United States, and from 6th to 12th grade, 62% were born in the United States. So that's just showing you that they are born with English-speaking people around them, but their families are not tending to speak English, and that's why they're growing up as ELLs. They're not really being exposed to the English speakers. Here is a graph kind of showing how many English language learners there are per state. PA is on the lower end with about 5%. The higher end is California, Nevada, New Mexico, Texas, kind of the ones that you would expect. The article kind of goes on to say that although 90% of these kids are enrolled in designated ELL programs, at least one recent study argues that the quality of these programs is suspect, which we did huge projects on this throughout this class, kind of looking at all the discrepancies of these programs and their shortcomings. And then the article kind of talks about how ELL students are identified, the different type of ELL programs, English as a second language, transitional bilingual, dual language, things we've already talked about, just kind of making the reader aware about what is out there. And then it moves on to kind of looking at what are these ELLs achieving. And this is the other image that I think is really stunning to look at. The darker blue is the ELL graduates compared to the lighter blue, which is the total graduates. West Virginia is way up there. That one's really interesting. ELL actually has a higher percentage. But all the rest of them, ELLs have a much, much lower percentage. We get to Pennsylvania, where 64.1% ELL graduate compared to 85% overall, which is about 20% different, which is huge. Let's see, Nebraska is another big one with 60 to 90. And then Arizona, one of the most populated areas for ELLs, is 18 to 75%. That's insane, and that definitely should not be happening. So this graph really shows us the problems that are arising with these programs and putting ELLs through and getting them at the same graduation rate. So it says, as a nation, only 63% of ELLs graduate from high school compared with 82% overall. Again, about a 20% difference. A big reason for this is teacher shortages. The last big graph kind of talks about how many times a shortage of ELL teachers were reported. And all the orange squares represent how many times these schools reported not having enough ELL teachers. And you can see that it's a ton of times. Pennsylvania here doesn't have as much as some of the other areas, but Rhode Island, Texas, Wisconsin, they all have orange across the chart. So it's kind of showing that there are not enough ESL teachers anywhere. Then we kind of end by talking about the gifted ELLs. There's only about 2% of them enrolled in gifted programs compared with 7.3% of non-ELL students. Again, a huge difference. And then we kind of go through the percentage of gifted English language learners versus non-language learners. And that is pretty much the end of this article. So this article offers a lot of great research, a lot of great stats, and some really good visuals kind of demonstrating how bad our country is doing with supporting these English language learners. So this is a great piece of research and empirical evidence to use when you're kind of making claims about the resources that ELLs don't have. So that's this article. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you find it helpful.